Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 25, a quarter of a century of the Laugh to Learn podcast, your weekly source for a comedic spin on the goings-on in the world. My name is Jacob Paveo, and I come to you from the Great White North every Tuesday evening, Eastern Standard Time, fresh for download to listen to at work on Wednesday morning for everyone the world around. That is, of course, assuming there is no great and fantastic nuclear event that would make it otherwise more difficult to listen to. This podcast comes to you ad-free, and all that I ask is you subscribe on any podcasting platform, or if you're over there on YouTube, and then tell your friends about this podcast, either in person or with a share on social media. The more friends you tell, the more likely it is that I'll keep coming back to you because, I want to please the people. I'm a man of the people, okay? A man of the people. As I've talked about before, I'm after this world domination. That is my plan right now. But a democratic world domination. I want everyone to want me to be the one to control and run everything. But until that day, we have to deal with today. So for today's episode, we are going to talk about two different topics, which I have briefly touched on before. Only this time, I'll be splitting the episode essentially in half and just focusing on these two topics in more detail. Actually, I wrote this intro before I wrote the rest of it. I'm basically focusing on one topic because I just kept writing. So the past few weeks, I have definitely focused more on the knowledgeable intellectual topics to discuss, and I haven't written as much jokes and comedy as I usually do. So for next week, I plan to get back into that. We have a long weekend here in Ontario this weekend, and I plan to make it extra long because I have been working at my real job way too much lately, so I'm going to make this a nice 4-day weekend for me and hopefully get some fishing and writing done, writing comedy, that is. But yeah, we are going to discuss this week an asteroid that passed by the Earth significantly closer to us than the moon, which is terrifying. But first, I'm going to spread the word about a group which I believe to be misunderstood, but for all of the wrong reasons. It is a dangerous, growing, and nowadays widely accepted movement. First, we are going to talk about Antifa. The idea of a group of Nazi-punching, anti-fascist citizens should be a fantastic thing, quite frankly, as I've stated before. The problem, however, comes when said group has really lost their sense of direction, because their enemies are apparently much more seldom than they would actually like them to be, which is ironic in it of itself. Rather than claiming victory, they have instead broadened the definition of the enemy in order to keep fighting it. Specifically, they see the anti-fascist movement has seemed to change the definition of a Nazi. The historical definition, I need to learn how to talk today, the historical definition of a Nazi is, quote, a member of the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party. However, I know no one uses that definition anymore, although it is still relevant, and we'll touch on that in a second. But in modern times, people tend to use the derogatory form of the word as an insult more than anything, which has two officially accepted definitions. So, and these are Google definitions because ain't nobody reading an actual dictionary anymore, right? So the first definition is, quote, a person with extreme racist or authoritarian views, end quote. And the second definition is, quote, a person who seeks to impose their views on others in a very autocratic or inflexible way, essentially by means of force. Now, this second definition is going to be the most interesting one to talk about, so that's why I've ordered them that way. But we're going to go through all three in order and focus in on them because, as I said, anti-fascists are the good guys if all of these definitions hold true, right? Getting rid of people who think in that way, I mean, there's no reason to think that that would be a bad thing, unless I guess you hold those ideas. I would describe myself as such, as anti-fascist. However, I am most certainly not aligned with the Antifa movement. So, let's get into it, see where we are today, and see why someone like me, who openly talks about not liking Nazis, can be so differently aligned with a group like this. First, the historical definition. Obviously, someone who either was or still is a member of the Nazi Party of Germany would be self-described as a Nazi, so we don't even have to give them that definition, right? They do it to themselves. Now, this is a political party which essentially still exists today. I don't actually think they can legally exist in Germany. I could just be talking out my ass, but I know that you're not allowed to praise the Nazi Party in Germany, so I would assume they don't exist anymore. But, like, we have a Nazi Party of Canada. There's a Nazi Party in the U.S. There's a Nazi Party in Israel. There's Nazi parties all over the world because that's what democracy is, right? And now, this is a political party which talks about the eradication of Jews, a pure-blood, very Voldemort, Harry Potter-esque leadership, and some extreme things, not that those aren't extreme, such as the removal of critically ill individuals from society when they can no longer contribute more than they take. So they actually used to, and these parties that exist in small numbers today still do believe that a sick child would or should be put to death because they can't work to pay enough into the system that is paying to keep them alive. So the amount you can contribute can't keep up with the cost. So it really is ultimate capitalism, and it is still alive today in very small numbers, and obviously not doing so well, but it's still around. And honestly, if someone truly believes in the political policy of the 1920s to the mid-1940s German Nazi Party, I think they're assholes, okay? How you could prescribe to those notions today is well beyond me. And honestly, if you want to punch the guy who still doesn't get it, go ahead, okay? You should still suffer the consequences of either, facing charges or a fine or having your ass beat back, since most of Antifa have certainly never learned how to fight. We'll get to that later. But nonetheless, punch away. These are very old school mentalities that really should have been removed from society by now. We kind of fought a war over it, but, people will hold on to their beliefs through anything, apparently. But I don't think that the actual Nazi parties of today are the problem, and only because of how small their numbers are. So it kind of changes where I want to look further into it to find out what exactly is going on. So now we have to move into the modern definitions. So this is where I may begin to differ in my opinions from some who may be listening. I really think that most people listening would agree that anyone who is openly in the Nazi Party of Canada or the Nazi Party of the U.S. or the Nazi Party of Oklahoma, whatever the hell it is the type of person that we don't like, okay? Probably going to fit that description. But it's important to remember as we get into this side of the topic that if you can't discuss a difference of opinion with someone and instead you simply wish violence on them, you are the problem, right? Basically, that's my way of saying, please don't dox me, but also you're a bitch if that thought crosses your mind during any of this conversation. Okay, so, quote, this is the definition, the first modern definition of the word Nazi as a derogatory term. Quote, a person with extreme racist or authoritarian views, end quote. I actually don't like the way that I say authoritarian. Authoritarian? Anyways, this is, as I said, the first derogatory definition in 2019 that we use today. Now, I'm going to pull a Willow Smith and straddle both sides of the fence here. After saying that out loud, I probably could have picked a more famous bisexual person, but that's what I just went with. Because your first instinct is, of course, to say that anyone who is racist or authoritarian is a bad person. But the important question to ask yourself is, where am I getting my definition of a bad person? And should we be allowed to physically act on this definition? Now, unfortunately, we will always have racists in the world, especially in the Western world, because you just have to be honest about how we got to where we are in the West. This is a place that was stolen from natives and then built by a combination of slaves and the newest migrant class of the time, be it the Irish, the Spanish, the Mediterranean, the Japanese. Now it's the Middle Eastern populations. These new migrant classes have and likely will always, although we are running out of places to pull people from, they will always be viewed by some portion of the original population as an other, right? An other to themselves, another group of people, and will therefore be discriminated against, be it overt or simply in like a digital form on Twitter or something. Racism will exist until everyone is completely homogenous. And we are literally hundreds, if not thousands of years away from that, right? From everyone looking the same. It will happen. There's no question that it will happen, because that's how it works. And it might actually get worse, right? As we start all looking more and more alike and there are less and less variations of people, you might end up with two different skin colors, right? One darker and one sort of lighter. That kind of compete with each other. You can imagine. So that's actually like great science fiction. If anyone wants to steal that idea, you can feel free. Although you're writing a science fiction book about racism, I wouldn't go there. That's why I'm giving it to you for free. So essentially, at this point, I just want to go back to your definition of bad, your definition of a bad person. So it's really important to always consider the fact that what you grew up with isn't necessarily what someone else grew up with, right? There are certain types of racism, certain racist acts, and I'm going to focus on racism because that's sort of the main flag here, right? So there are certain racist acts that, like lynching, that it doesn't matter how you grew up. It's a bad thing. There's no excuse for lynching, right? Then you start moving down the scale, and you go down somewhat significantly to things like when people call the police on a black family because they're in a swimming pool, and you literally say, that person doesn't live here. And it turns out that person does live here, but you called the police on them because you don't think a black person or a black family can afford to live where you live, white girl, right? That is a form of racism that is not good in society, but not criminal. Does that person deserve to be punched in the face? Probably not. Is that person a Nazi? Definitely not. Are they a bad person? I mean, you could argue yes, right? You could argue that someone who has that in their heart, in their mind, that because of this color of your skin, you can't be here, right? And it might not even be they might not even be cognizant of it, right? It's just a reaction that this person doesn't belong here. Those are problems, but those are problems that will always exist. And at a certain point, we just have to kind of, call the person a fucking moron for what they've done. And I'm sure you've seen some of these stories, right? A girl sleeping in a dorm room that had the police called on her. She was sleeping in like the common area of her university dorm room, studying at exam time. And someone was like, "Oh my God, she doesn't belong here." And she's a fucking black girl. It's like fucking crazy. And then there's the black family, as I kind of alluded to, in the swimming pool that had the cops called on them because someone said that they don't live here when they've lived there for like 10 years. There was the black family having a barbecue, and that fucking fat, ugly white girl called the cops on them because they're not allowed to cook here. And it's just like, the Starbucks situation, right, where they called the police on a few black guys chilling in a Starbucks. It's just, stuff like this is always going to exist. But if you're like me and you look at these situations and you think, like, that is not okay, we also need to really pick our battles, right? Those can't be the hills you die on. Because someone who is not so overt in their racism may actually not be cognizant of it. It may be the unfortunate reality of how someone grew up, right? It's super important to always remember that the way you grew up is not the same way that someone else grew up. Your ideals are not the same as someone else's. And just because theirs, according to what you were taught, are extremely incorrect, and their ideals and their really their opinions are somewhat outdated and centuries old, it doesn't mean that the person can't A, learn, and B, evolve from it, right? There's always that possibility that it's not a bad person, it's a bad situation. That they grew up in a situation where that's how they ended up today. And I just want to say that because it is really important to remember that everyone has opinions and thoughts that are just dumb, right? Like, they just are. So we're never going to come to terms with everyone. And I really, really want to always point out those situations when they come up, but quickly move on from them, because the ugly white girl who calls the cops for a black family having a barbecue is probably not spending her days plotting to get rid of black people in society when those types of people still exist, right? So we need to be very careful about how you approach topics of race. So I need to move on to the third definition here, because I believe these two definitions are intrinsically connected. Absolutely intrinsically connected. So just once again, the last definition is a person with extreme racist or authoritarian views. Now the third definition is, quote, a person who seeks to impose their views, their racist and authoritarian views, on others in a very autocratic or inflexible way, right? This is the most ironic part, because I think it's irrelevant how your home country got to where it is, be it revolution, peaceful separation from a homeland, beheading a king, simply removing a king and creating a democracy. We all have shady pasts as nations, right? But we need to look only at where we are today to determine how we should respond today. And if it wasn't clear already, I'm getting into the fact that Donald Trump seems to be the precipice around which the anti-fascist movement began to gain real traction. The first violent march was in Portland, Oregon, right after the election. The first violent march conducted by Antifa, I should point out. And it was right after the election results were released. And Portland has really remained the hub of Antifa activities since. There are groups all over the place. There was one actually right here in my hometown, a small group of like whatever it is, like 10 or 11 people showed up and held their signs and wore masks and didn't do anything. But Portland is where they're focused, although, yes, they exist everywhere. Now, Trump is not my first choice. I'm not even an American, but he would certainly not be my first choice. In fact, he's someone I couldn't ever cast a ballot for. Why? Well, because I think he lacks the required intellect to manage my finances. I'm an accountant. I would not let him manage my finances, let alone an entire nation, okay? However, I don't think he was always this way. A 40-year-old Donald Trump I would trust with my business. I think at the age of 73, like most people, he's just losing his fucking mind, okay? I know people get upset about ageism, but it's just a reality that he's 73 years old. Listen to an interview of Donald Trump from 20 years ago, right? He sounds normal. He's at 53, he sounded like the kind of guy who you could actually see genuinely being a half-decent politician. He'd still be like Donald Trump, the one that you see today. He just wouldn't have the outbursts that he does. He wouldn't be as crazy as he appears to be, at least on camera and on Twitter and in writing and fucking everything you can imagine about him, right? Typically, as you get older, in my experience, watching people grow old, you go one way or another. Biden seems to be getting overly nice, and Trump seems to be getting overly aggressive. They are 76 and 73 years old. That's the way that it has been for me watching family members and other friends and whatnot, like, grow older, right? You tend to become super nice or super rude, okay? Trump seems to be the rude, aggressive type. But is he a racist? Is he an authoritarian who seeks to impose his views in an autocratic or violent manner? Quite frankly, no, he's not. When you really sit down and look at things for what they are, Trump would likely love to have more Black, Hispanic, and Asian cabinet members, right? This is something that's often thrown at him, that really outside of Ben Carson, I almost said Carson Bennett, I don't know why, Ben Carson, who is head of urban and housing development or something like that, housing and urban development, who's super not qualified for that job. I've said it before, he should be the Surgeon General, but anyways, no one wants to work for him. That's why he has no minorities working for him, because no one wants to. That's why the White House is like empty. There's like still hundreds of jobs empty because people you have to be qualified to do these jobs. It's better to have no one do them than just a random person, and all of the qualified people don't want to work for him. That's why they're all old white people, because they'll take the job, right? Minorities right now don't want to take that job. That's the reality. And it's so obvious. I don't know why no one talks about it. It's so obvious to me. He's also plenty smart, and the recent comment where he said, go back to where you came from, which is something that I absolutely despise. I do not like that he said that. He made the comment to the Squad, which is a shitty name for a political group. Y'all need to drop that. It's a group of 4 female minority members of Congress, headed up by the illustrious AOC Alexia Ocasio-Cortez, and Ilhan Omar, who is someone who I absolutely do not agree with as well, would never vote for, equally as much as I wouldn't vote for Trump, because I believe she is, rather than racially motivated, like a lot of people say Trump is, I think that she is religiously motivated in her voting, but that's for another day. Actually, you can listen to my old podcast where I discuss this. Yeah, sorry, I have to get back to the Squad because I keep looking at it on my screen. They need to drop that name. Who in the hell? You're trying to be a grown-ass woman, okay? All 4 of you are trying to be grown. Drop the name Squad. You're not fucking 12 years old playing Fortnite. Guess what? He knows that saying go back where you came from works with his voters. This is one of those things that I don't think 53-year-old Donald Trump would have said, but 73-year-old Donald Trump just doesn't give a fuck. He knows it's going to work. And I'm sorry, but if nearly half the country, right, he had 46.1% of the vote against Hillary's 48.2%. I know I'm talking about an election that happened before these comments, but it's still 46% of the country that voted for this man. These have to be widely accepted opinions. And that's 46.1% of the popular vote, right? I know he lost the popular vote. Still 46%. That's a shit ton. That's widely accepted. 46% of opinion being the same is widely accepted. Maybe not where you or I live, but this is how I logically came to where I am today regarding the admiration for him and his victory and everything we've seen, how his numbers don't drop. It's because I don't get it. Like, that's what it comes down to. I live in a very conservative area. I shouldn't say that. And I know lots of people who are adamant supporters of Trump. Actually, I might even know there, like, people from where I grew up, there might be an equal number of support for each. It's a very conservative area. And, you know, I had to logically find a way to sort out how what he's saying resonates with so many people. And the only logical answer is that half of people feel the same way. They talk the same way. They just do it in groups that I'm not a part of and you are not a part of, right? I'm not sure how you can view him as authoritarian. I'm just not sure how you can do that because he's gone through the courts on all issues, and the only real controversy about this was his refusal to pass over evidence from a subpoena, which the courts ruled he, as president, had the authority to not do, right? They said, we can't arrest you while you're president, we can't subpoena you while you're president. That is what the courts ruled. So, you know, that wasn't his rule. He didn't come down as a king and say, no, I'm not listening to you, and just not do it. It's a rule that the country made several years ago, and he's just following it, that he doesn't have to do it, so he's not going to, just like no other president would, right? He's not bending any rules. He's not authoritarian. Am I saying that if he had the option, he wouldn't become? No, no. Of course, if he had the option to just pass whatever laws he could, he would. But guess what? So would most politicians. Most. And, like, that's almost a scary thing to say, but also it's a very obvious thing to say. Like, do you think if Justin Trudeau here in Canada couldn't just snap his fingers and make any rule that he wanted to happen, that he wouldn't do it? Of course he would. That's why you try to pass laws. That's why you try to win majorities in the House. That's why you try to get people to vote for other people in your political party, not just you. Because you having a seat is nothing without everyone else in your party having a seat, right? That's the idea of politics, is you want control. So to say that he doesn't want to be, or to say, oh, he wants to be authoritarian, they all fucking do. What are you talking about? That is a ridiculous comment to make. Actually, this is a comment that I've heard in extremely well-renowned, or at least formerly well-renowned places like CNN and the BBC has talked about it. The CBC here in Canada has talked about it. I've heard it. He seems to want to be an authoritarian act when he tried the what's now referred to, we call it a Muslim ban, right? I was totally against it. But how is that an authoritarian act? And if it did get through somehow, how would that have been authoritarian? Because every politician wants what they want to pass. It's just a ridiculous sentiment. It's a ridiculous sentiment that you absolutely cannot hold towards any politician, right? So if half the country agrees with him, it has to be because half the country agrees with him, right? It can't be objectively wrong. It has to be a subjective issue. There's subjectivity to it. And I'm not going to draw that line for where there's subjectivity and where there isn't. But when it comes to his statements, clearly there is some form of subjective tenure to it. Some sort of subjective resonance that you, I should say, as Americans, need to sort out, because it's not going to be me on a podcast drawing that line in the sand. It's got to come from the top. And hopefully there's debates tonight. That's why I'm recording my podcast a little bit early. 8 o'clock, the Democratic debates begin, and I'm looking forward to them. But anyways, I don't think he's the monster that he's been made out to be. It's actually becoming sort of cringeworthy to see it continuing 3 years in. And honestly, like, late night comedy needs a new hero. They've got to shut the fuck up about Donald Trump. I can't watch them anymore because they're not funny anymore. They've just lost it. That's why I've said before I try not to do Trump jokes, because it's just like, they're easy. Everyone does them, and everyone goes, oh, we don't like Trump either. It's like, yeah, we know. But it's like doing a Nazi joke. It's like, old news. But back onto Antifa. I believe the second definition almost perfectly encapsulates the definition of a Nazi. They clearly attempt to force their beliefs by autocratic methods. This is something that Antifa does every time they get together, it seems. A few weeks ago, Andy No, a gay Filipino journalist, was assaulted by a group at an Antifa march, a group of Antifa representatives, because he had written about and recorded them damaging property in the city of Portland and assaulting other individuals on a separate day. This happened in front of the downtown courthouse, and not one single police officer came to his aid. Not one. He had to get away on his own and walk to the hospital. This is their goal. It's to scare people into letting them burn cities to the ground, to fight the voiceless and beat them into submission by sheer numbers alone. This is not a true anti-fascist movement. This is an anarchist movement, which is something that I know very well as someone who was truly an anarchist through high school. I believed it was the best way to run a society. But then I have to ask myself, how did I change? How did I get to where I am today, where I truly believe, and I've realized, actually, is what I should say, there's no belief, it's fact, that a democratic system as ours is the only good option we have. Quite frankly, I grew up. I saw the world, traveled, and I've really thought a lot about political philosophy. I find that anarchy is the easiest option to solve all of someone's individual problems. If you're robbed, you take justice into your own hands however you choose. Kill the person, let them go, beat them up and get your stuff back. Tell people that it was them, however you want to handle it. If someone's a racist, punch them. If someone disagrees, beat them until they get the sense knocked into them. But this does not work on a large scale. The world is a dangerous and violent place. And luckily for them, for members of Antifa, these kids have not had to realize that yet. They haven't had to realize just how dangerous our world really is. However, the common phrase I see is self-defense, quote-unquote self-defense. They claim they're defending themselves physically against a literary or verbal attack. They say that words really do hurt. This is how I know, as I mentioned at the top, they've never been in a real fight before. They've never studied a martial art. They've never played football. They've never played hockey. Because words do not hurt. Words are never an attack. Forget about the law, which obviously agrees with what I'm saying. But what kind of a bitch would say that they were harmed by someone else's opinion? That just means that you're living under a rock and you need to look at the world for what it is and really come to terms with how you will handle the pressure of a world where you are just one voice, one opinion, in a multilateral sea of ideas and philosophies. When you find a group that think and act like you in large numbers, it can make you feel like you have it figured out because others feel the same way. But as the point of view of this show really is, that's not how we grow. We don't grow by talking to people who feel the same way we do. That is not how we become the best version of ourselves. So cut the crap and get off Twitter. Meet some people with different opinions and try to understand how and why they think as they do. Because everyone outside of your city will not stand for that shit. Outside of Portland, no one will stand for it. Beating someone's opinion out of them, as Antifa claims to do, or actually does, is equal to beating your opinions into them, as the modern definition of fascism states. Ooh, that was intense. This week, I should say, in What the Fuck, which is a segue, a sequence, an event, whatever. It's a part of the show that I'm trying to do every single week, at least a little bit. A woman and her family is suing a 10-year-old for winning a game of dodgeball. Essentially, her son has an illness which has not been disclosed. It probably doesn't need to be disclosed. It's probably a little inappropriate to have it disclosed to the public. But her son has an illness where he can't play dodgeball. He'll get extremely injured, and if he gets hurt, he can get whatever. His body has trouble healing is basically the way that it's been described. So, fine. But what happened was this, and for some reason they're making this racial, so whatever. I'm just going to tell you the story as it's been given, and then I'm going to tell you what I think about it. So, essentially, little white boy has this illness, and he's not allowed to play sports. He decides to play dodgeball with a group of kids at school, apparently in gym class. Little black boy playing dodgeball in gym class, both of them 10 years old, throws a dodgeball, smacks white kid in the face with it, therefore winning because he was fucking eliminated, bitch. Little white kid gets seriously injured. I probably overreacted on my "you're eliminated, bitch." But anyways, he lost, right? He got hit with the dodgeball, didn't catch it, and he lost. He's out of the game. Well, turns out he shouldn't have been playing, as I alluded to, and he got hurt. Well, now the family of the little white boy is suing the family of the little black boy because for aggravated assault. Aggravated assault for throwing a dodgeball in a game of dodgeball. Okay. The whole race thing, who cares? Doesn't matter what color these kids are. Doesn't matter where they live or anything. This comes down to just basic human principles, basic human dignity, right? If you have a 10-year-old child who is not supposed to be playing a game and does so anyways, even if you told him and the gym teacher he's not allowed to, right? There's no way it's this other kid's fault. There just isn't. Beyond that, your kid got hit in the face with a dodgeball. What are you doing as a parent? His father needs, maybe he's not allowed to throw a baseball. I don't know. Put a fucking helmet on and teach this kid how to catch a dodgeball. By the time I was 10, I wasn't getting hit in the head with no damn dodgeball. Let me tell you, I was catching that shit. You got to learn that in gym class. That's part of hand-eye coordination. That's why they make you throw these big-ass rubber balls at each other. Because hand-eye coordination is super important in sports. And dodgeball is a great way to learn that. Because you're dodging balls and you're catching them out of the air and everything. It's a fun game. But yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm hoping this gets thrown out, and it doesn't go anywhere. This family that's suing, another family from their kid's school is just fucked in the head. Stop trying to get money out of everything. Like, just because your son is sick, I'm sorry, but that is not this other family's problem. Even if this little kid, this little 10-year-old kid who threw the dodgeball knew that this other kid shouldn't be playing dodgeball, I bet you he wasn't the only one who threw a dodgeball at him that day. He's just the one that actually knew how to throw a dodgeball and got it through his hands and smack right in the head. But honestly, if the teacher knew, sure, maybe the teacher's at fault. Why the hell are you suing the family of the kid that threw the dodgeball? It's just ridiculous. Anyways, I have to move on from this because it's dumb as hell, and I'll be following the story. I'll give you an update in the coming weeks if anything comes out, but I'm assuming this is going to be a long, dragged-out story, as they always are. So, do not forget to subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and family. Tell them all about it. Mention it at work. Mention it everywhere you go. Scream it out in the mall. Be like, hey, listen to the Left to Learn podcast. People in the mall love that when you do stuff like that. You know how I know? Because I do it all the time. I just yell it in the mall. You actually don't know if that's true. It could be. I'm crazy enough to do it. That way, everyone will know about the incredible content available completely ad-free every single Tuesday evening. As always, thank you so much for the support, and feel free to reach out to me anytime using the contact page over at www.laughtolearnpodcast.com or on social media, which can be found in the description for this episode on your podcast platform of choice. My name, as always, is Jacob Paveo, and I am going to get briefly into my next topic. This one is going to be a scary one. Get ready for it. So, as I mentioned, I want to get this podcast up before the debates begin. The Democratic debates, night 1 of 2, because there are way too many fucking people running. So I'm just going to briefly touch on this, because I've touched on it a little bit in the past, and I want to bring it up again. And this is going to be a real thing for me moving forward. So, on July 24th, at 9:31 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, as I was in my weekly meeting at work every Wednesday. I will be there tomorrow, but don't stalk me at work, even though anyways. An asteroid around 100 meters or 328 feet in diameter passed by the Earth at 357,000 kilometers, which is 222,000 miles for my out-of-touch imperial American friends. Although Americans make up most of my listening audience, so I actually love you. This is closer to us than our moon. So, literally, a massive asteroid passed at a closer distance than our moon only, well, at this point, 6 days ago, but you'll probably listen to this on Wednesday, so 7 days ago. Meaning that it is the closest call to a nuclear bomb-sized impact that we have ever recorded. And the scary part is, we only had 2 days' notice. And in reality, it was only a few hours' notice from when we knew the actual trajectory of the asteroid. So we found it with 2 days, and we had no idea where it was headed. Then it was like, holy fuck, it looks like it's going to hit us. And 2 hours before it passed, we were like, whew, it's going to just miss us. And this is like so close, guys. So fucking close. It's not even funny. It's it sounds far, 222,000 miles, right? Humans have been farther than this. We have flown farther than this, right? This is fucking close in space. It could have wiped a full city off the face of the planet like that, like nothing. If it hit the water off the coast of somewhere, it would have caused instantly these massive tsunamis that could have wiped out thousands of miles of coastline, right? Like, if this landed off the coast of New York, just think of, like, from all the way from Florida all the way up north through, like, the Carolinas, keep going north, all of, like, the tri-state area through Connecticut, all the way up the coast. Eastern Canada would just be blasted with tsunamis, killing how many tens, if not, probably several tens of millions of people could die. If this landed off the coast of LA, right? What if it landed off the coast of Japan and wiped out Tokyo? You have, like, what the fuck, like 1 billion people in Tokyo. Or Hong Kong. Like, the amount of people these can kill is not even funny, and we are doing fuck all about it. I'm telling you that we are not likely to have to fear nuclear weapons. We just aren't. It is quite literally 100% certain that an object right now that is headed on a collision course with Earth that can destroy all life as we know it is on its way here. This is an absolute certainty, and it can't be stressed enough. Like, it is going to happen if you wait long enough. Might not be in my lifetime, might not be in yours, but it's going to happen. It has happened before. Twice, it has literally killed, like, every living thing on Earth. Twice! The problem is there is very little funding to identify these objects, let alone there's no funding on how to divert them. There is a plan that NASA has on how to theoretically change the course of a large object and the course, the orbit it takes through the sky. However, estimates are that we would need about 10 years to develop the technology to divert its course. All right? I've talked about this before. But realize that last Wednesday's visitor to Earth, we had 2 days notice. If it was like 2 days notice and we know it's going to hit us and it's big enough to kill us all, too bad. There's nothing we can do about it. It would hit us whether we knew it was coming or not. We would just know what side of the Earth it hit us on. And in this case, it was on the sun side, so everyone in North America would have hit somewhere over here. Like, it literally, it passed by in the middle of the day on this side of the Earth where almost all of my listeners are. Okay? Like, I'm not fucking around with how serious this is. And it's like people are like, oh, cool, an asteroid flew by. Did anyone take a picture? Oh, no, we didn't get it. Oh, maybe next time we'll get a picture. No! Let's not let there be a fucking next time. This is fucking real shit. Like, do you know how many millions of people can fucking die? And this is not like, oh, there's bombs and that we can talk to the Iranians and maybe, no. Like, these are coming. They're fucking coming. All right? We know for a fact there is not a single astrophysicist out there who would say that there is not something coming towards Earth eventually that will wipe life off the planet. It's going to happen. Forget about the sun swallowing the Earth. That's not a problem for us. Life will be wiped off this planet long before that because it'll be hit by a massive fucking object that'll destroy everything here. All right? This, I truly believe, will be the cause that I spend my life fighting for in the political realm because it's one that we need researched. It is no joke, and I am quite frankly terrified at the prospect. There's very little that actually scares me about the world. This is one of those things because, like, anything, this object came from behind the sun. Because of how bright the sun is, we can't see what's behind it. We don't fucking know what's there. There could be a massive object headed for us that's going to hit literally while I'm recording. No, like, we would have no warning. A few hours. They would literally put out a warning like, hey, this is going to hit us. It would literally be like, you're all going to die. Like, that's like, if they're like a large asteroidal object or whatever, spatial object is expected to hit, central Ontario or northern New York in the next 2 hours, I would read that and be like, huh, fuck, great. I'm going to die. There's nothing I can do about it. I can go underground and get crushed underground. I can stay above ground and get blasted by rock and debris flying at me and fire and explosions. And then all the dust goes up into the air, kills all the vegetation, kills everyone slowly around the planet. That's what will happen. So if anyone listening has a legitimate idea or source to get this discussed at higher political levels, feel free to reach out to me because it's going to be a longer road ahead. It is a long-term thing that I'm going to have to think about and work on, and I really just want to see some major funding, not even major, like just a little bit of funding put into this. Like, we need to sort this problem out because this is like actually the human, like, forget about what the fuck the UN does by putting troops in these fucking small countries to do nothing. The UN should be like, okay, this is the one thing that impacts us, that can kill us all. So let's put our money into this and forget about the rest, because this is the important thing that needs to get done. Thank you all for listening. I really encourage you to take these discussions outside to the real world with your friends or with me over on Twitter, or jump into my DMs, slide on in over on Instagram. As always, this podcast is completely ad-free, and all that I ask is for you to share it with your friends and family, subscribe on any podcasting app, and tell your friends about me each and every week. You can find all my social media and contact information down below. Visit me over at www.laughtolearnpodcast.com. And until next time, keep on laughing and keep on learning.